like unfollowed him because he's too crazy. He's like from conspiracy theorist, Satanist crazy. He went on full on like fundamentalist Christian. Hello, and welcome to the QUACKCAST. This is QUACKCAST number 426. I'm Ozone Ocean, and with me is Tance Serene. Hi, Tance.
Hello.
And on this particular QUACKCAST, we're going to be talking about sidekicks. Both our sidekicks are absent today, Baines and Pitts, unfortunately. So, Baines is my sidekick, and Pitts is Tance's sidekick. And yeah, we're sort of making do, unfortunately. So, yeah, we're going to talk about sidekicks, but before we do that, we've got to get into the featured comic. And the featured comic, QUACKCAST, has given me customer service, or given us customer service. So, take it away, Kwai, with customer service.
Hello, this is QUACKCAST, and the feature I've selected for this week is Customer Service by Sinwells, and it is rated T for Teen. Customer Service is a very relatable comic for anyone who has ever had experience working from behind a cash register. There are familiar occurrences like the onslaught of a mixed variety of customers that ask a bunch of questions, to the overbearing boss that believes the customer is always right, to little old ladies that like to share their whole life story. This is a window peeking into the slice of life craziness of customer service representative. The comic is mostly drawn in black and white with an occasional teal background. It is formatted in a 4-panel square comic format. Take a break from your day job to watch other people do their day job and read Customer Service by Sinwells, rated T.
And that was the featured comic, Customer Service. Kwai, you always give great customer service. Thank you. So next up we have the featured music. This week, Gumwallace has given us the theme to Operation Boom. This one thunders. All action and furious energy rolling in like a 50-ton bulldozer at high speed while on fire and sparking with insane electrical discharges. This is danger music, bright yellow with black diagonal lines. Listen for the deep bass. Boom. Our music, Operation Boom. Gumwallace, you've given us a great theme to that great comic, and of course it's by Reckless Hero, and it's rated E. And Gumwallace gave the theme to The Last Sheriff, which was the another comic by Reckless Hero. So, sidekicks. Yes. Now this is such a huge subject. Well, supporting characters as well. Supporting characters can like, sidekicks are supporting characters. They're like the apex of the supporting character. Supporting characters are not all sidekicks. Sidekicks are a specialized version of that, aren't they? They are specific ones. But sidekicks are a fantastic crystallization of that role. And they're so useful in so many ways, aren't they? I mean, we were talking on the Patreon video. We really got into the subject there of some great sidekicks like Dr. Watson, Robin.
There are a lot of very iconic sidekicks, and not all serve the same purpose. What we mentioned in the video, which you should all see,
the naked video,
is was that a function of the sidekick is to help create opportunities for natural looking opportunities for dialogue when a main character is very stoic or not likely to be talking to anyone if a sidekick is not there to prod and coax dialogue and interaction to overtly happen, which of course is very, very important for the narrative. But I don't want to get into that too much because we talked nicely about it in the video, so you should go see that and see also our expressions and everything.
Yeah, it's amazing
It's
expressions.
best.
Those
Yes,
were cool.
we put on a show. We put on a show. So, but there are also like the most classic, quote unquote, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Sidekick would be like Asterix and Obelix.
Oh yeah.
You have the clever main hero who has all the better traits, and then you have the not so clever sidekick who is there to basically show off by contrast how awesome the main character is. Or even give opportunities for the main character to be heroic. Not in the case of Asterix and Obelix, because Obelix was always, the muscle, and he rarely or not ever needed saving. But in other situations, you have the sidekick always being captured or in danger of some sort, and then the main hero rushes in and shows us how capable on the one hand, and also how brave and noble he can be on demand. So there's that's the more classic, I think, use for sidekick.
Yeah. The like Bunny Manders I'm just thinking of a classic example, Bunny Manders and Raffles. So these are classic stories where Raffles is the gentleman thief in sort of Edwardian England, and Bunny Manders is his scampy sidekick who's been around with him since they were schoolboys in their private school together. So Bunny is there to marvel at the majesty of Raffles' cleverness and his his daring do and his clever disguises, exactly the same way as Watson does with Sherlock Holmes. And Raffles does the same kind of disguises and things like that.
And now you are making me also think of Blackadder and Baldric.
Oh, fantastic example, yeah.
Who, I mean, and the difference though is that Baldric doesn't actually stand in reverence of Blackadder. He is not awed by Blackadder's wit or cleverness or whatever. I think it's more like the other way around. Blackadder is amazed by how stupid Baldric can get, and he gets a kick out of that. And of course, we also get amazing firecracker level dialogue, which is absolutely stellar.
Of course, that's a fantastic combination. Well, they started
I have a cunning plan. Like Baldric thinks that he's clever, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So
he's under that beautiful misapprehension. We started out with the two sidekicks. So Blackadder had Percy and Baldric together. Look, it's weird. So in the very first series, you have Percy and Baldric as the two clever ones, and Blackadder as this dunce, and that didn't work as it just didn't work very well to have them as the smart one. So for me, my favorite is in the second series where you've got Percy and Baldric as two different sorts of sidekick. So Baldric is the dumb, common, disgusting, smelly kind of character, and Percy is on the same social sphere as Blackadder, so he's a peer as well as being a sidekick. So you can have different kinds of sidekick kind of things happening.
I like all of Blackadder, but depending on my mood, my favorites are the last two seasons, Blackadder the third and Blackadder goes fourth. Blackadder the third, I think, is the best in terms of making you laugh, and also has the very rare occurrence that the character with the highest ranking is actually a sidekick, which is Prince George.
Yeah.
Prince George is a sidekick that is also potentially dangerous when he decides to pull rank on Blackadder. Yeah. But for all intents and purposes, he is like Percy in season 2, and not only I think he has like Blackadder has to be subservient to him, but he also always manipulates him and more or less dominates him a lot. Yeah. So because George always looks to him to call the shots, and so yeah.
Yeah, George defers to him. He does, but it's done very cleverly in that when Blackadder wants something, or when he wants something, he has to frame it in such a way to convince George. So he can't order George to do things. It has to be done in a roundabout way. And it's totally different when he is interacting with Baldric, in that he just straight out tells Baldric what to do. So yeah, it's a beautifully complicated relationship between those three characters. So having two sidekicks, that's a good thing, where you have different interactions that you have to perform with them. So yeah, that's interesting. And in the fourth one, it's changed again in that it's not Captain Darling. That's what
you have Darling, but it's Melchett. He's Melchett is the one that has one of the top ranks. I don't remember. I think he's not a general. Is he general? General Melchett?
Yeah, I think so. He's a general.
Yeah, and he is of course an absolute idiot, and also he makes a lot of statements as a character about how ranking like the high brass acted in wars in general, but aside that, the fun thing in Blackadder Goes Forth is that for the first time, Blackadder is the leader within his small constellation of primary characters. Like when he is in the trenches, he is the leader. He is the one that calls the shots. So both Baldric and George are below him in rank. So you have them in proper sidekick interaction and position as well.
Yeah.
And the thing is that neither of them, and this is the one thing that I really like, is that neither of his sidekicks completely have a grasp of their position as sidekicks, and that they are the dancers, basically. So,
and they're different.
And I think that yes, they are different kinds of stupid. They're not the same kind of stupid.
Well, on one you have a working class fellow, which is Baldric, who's very low status, and then you have George, who is socially superior to Blackadder, and he's a high status person, but in rank he's lower. So yeah, he's an upper class twit and a lower class idiot.
Yeah.
To whatever Blackadder is, I just don't know. Like grammar school boy, I suppose. And yes. So you've got that. Yeah, interesting.
It does say in the final episode that he and his classmates skipped all the way to the recruiting office thinking that it would be a fun thing to do or something like that.
But yeah, that's an interesting use of sidekicks. Is the classic thing is to have one sidekick, but Blackadder always had two. Although Dowling is Melchard's sidekick, very much so, and he's the classic villain sidekick in that villains always have a toadying lieutenant, second in command, who's just there to show, to laugh at the good guy as if that was something he did, but it was always the big baddie who did the bad thing, and the villain sidekick is there to sneer, basically.
Sneer and take pleasure at all the evil doing that is happening.
In an uncouth way that your high status villain can't do. Your high status villain is never going to. I mean, Meltzer's not really a villain, but he does fill that role. So he doesn't sneer. The sidekick can do that for him, and can be petty.
Yes, exactly. That's a use for sidekicks. Like, they externalize things that your main character shouldn't, but you need, in terms of the narrative, to be there in order for other interactions to happen. So you have your sidekick there to do that.
An interesting thing we touched on, the class nature of sidekicks. So we've got, Baldric is the working class guy, and so he naturally falls into a sidekick role. But that class nature of sidekicks is very typical in British writing, in that Holmes and Watson is a slightly lower social class to Holmes, and that's implicit in the way that people interact with Holmes and Watson, and the knowledge that Holmes has of writing and things like that versus Watson, which is slightly lower class. Bunny Manders in the Raffles stories is the same. They're sort of on the same level, but Raffles is a little bit more superior. And often when they play it when you have that in theatrical versions, it's always Holmes and Raffles are always played by more upper class kind of people, and the others are slightly lower class. And that's the same thing in Lord of the Rings. So you've got Frodo.
That's a very, very British alignment that you have there.
Frodo is a high status, higher class person who comes from he's inherited his house from Bilbo. It's an older family. The Bagginses have always lived in Baggins Hall, and
they even have this branch of evil family, like the Sackville Bagginses.
Yes, exactly.
The lesser of the of the clan.
Exactly. But Sam Gamgee, or so he falls into the role of Batman, which is what you had, a military rank that Tolkien would have been familiar with, especially in the First World War, where officers had a servant that was picked out from one of the men who had just performed the role of a manservant, and this was a guy who
the ordnance, basically.
It was a guy who was a soldier, and he just had that role as getting the guy's shaving water ready in the morning, packing up his gear, being a servant. And that's the role that Sam had, based on Tolkien's experience in that kind of environment in the First World War. So Sam comes from very much a lower social status, a lower class. He's a gardener kind of person, and I think the dialogue is written in such a way in that he sort of talks with that kind of accent from the country kind of thing.
And he sounds, at least in the beginning, he sounds like very simplistic and like a simple person.
A man of the land who knows about trees and gardening, that kind of thing. My lord, I'll take care of it for you.
And he basically remains that way throughout.
Yeah.
He always, like, I don't know if he ever calls Frodo actually Frodo, and not, it's the Mr. Like
Master.
Mr. Frodo, Mr.
Mr.
Frodo.
Frodo.
It's like,
Yeah.
like all the time. And like they have been through thick and thin, like you have walked through fire together and it's still Mr. Frodo. And it's like, ugh, okay, no.
Yeah. But to our sensibilities, that seems on the nose, but that's very much a part of that British culture from, the Edwardian era when Tolkien sort of comes from, which is charming in a way, because it's
hate it.
Well, it's a snapshot of the time gone by, and it helps you understand that the social, class system that he came from and that existed in that kind of time. Yeah, it is on the nose very much so, because you sort of think in a more egalitarian way. People are equal. There should not be people sort of naturally falling into subservient roles based on
it's
their education.
To a very big extent. To a very big extent, this is part of culture shock. Like this sort of thing in the Greek reality, doesn't matter where you stand socially in Greek society, this sort of thing just wouldn't wash.
Yeah.
There is no way in hell. Like they would start, that's very possible. They would start like Mr. Frodo this and Mr. Frodo that, and let's do this and let's do that, blah, blah, blah. But by the time they were like halfway through the book, it would be either, I call you Frodo and we are on equal terms, because right now there is no rank, there is nothing. We have to, basically be back to back and fend for each other, or you can, carry your own stupid luggage and buzz off. I'm going back to Shire.
It'd turn out that whoever is the most competent will fill the role as leader, rather than
that too.
Naturally falling into the the social class positions, which is what that was based on. And that reminds me of actually a classic example, Evelyn Waugh, famous British writer. So he's writing about his experiences, sort of a slightly fictionalized version of the experiences in the Second World War. So he's in, I think it was in Crete, and there was a retreat from the Germans. So he had this guy who he was like as a minor officer, and he had a guy who functioned as his Batman, who was this person who was like initially very subservient because socially fitted into that class, but it turned out this fellow only really picked him to be only really came into that role because he knew that let's just call Evelyn, even though the character's like a fictionalized version of Evelyn, he knew he was a soft touch, and he knew that he would automatically be sort of thinking in that kind of I'm a high class, so I must be the leader. So he sort of thought, I can manipulate him, and I can use his status in order to steal things and get away with whatever, because
totally, that would also happen.
And that would also happen. That's what happened with these two. Go on.
Another thing that you have to consider, especially in Greek culture, is that if someone is so standing on ceremony to that level, then that means that there's something off and something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Like you don't make these connections consciously. It comes through the common unconscious sort of thing. Like people react to it subconsciously in this manner, like this process. So if this person is not all there and needs to be looking at the surface all the time, then they are not checking the substance underneath. So shenanigans can take place there.
And you
so
take
it's
advantage.
Yes, and then it is just sheer luck whether they are just going to make fun and not otherwise hurt or manipulate or use the person, or they might actually really pull a fraudulent situation or malicious situation. It depends then on the person. But you are not, at least you are not going to get away without being teased at, without anyone realizing, like without you realizing it and everyone else knowing the joke. But you never get wind of it. So there's that.
Well, yeah.
Be very careful of these things.
That's what happened in this part of the story. But we had, the good thing about it was there was a role reversal in that he realized his role. He realized, this guy actually knows what he's a survivor. He's smart enough to be able to get out of this and still stay alive. And he acknowledged it and said, okay, you take the lead. And so they stole a tank together, and he just followed him, and got out of the situation, and got back safely. So it's it pays to recognize who the smart one is in the thing. Don't fall on classism as your guide to know who's in charge, or education. It's whoever's smart, and I think that's how it is in the modern world. We don't have that problem of people sticking to those class roles.
I would beg to differ. Like, we are better at it, I'll give you that, but unfortunately there is a tendency, maybe we are wired this way, people do think in categories and neat boxes, and whoever happens to be in a specific box, you tend to take him without much questioning, unless they are like super extremely, acting out or things like that. I don't think that people don't take into account class and roles and who comes with the title. I mean, so that's why you get basically incompetent people that just go through the moves without being fit for the position, and they stay there, and nobody questions their capacity to hold that position at all.
Okay, so it can happen. Well, I mean, there are some class roles that are more set in stone, that aren't just based on convention. In that political position, hereditary royalty, those things do exist. But we are sort of getting away from sidekicks. So
yes, we are. Let's go back to sidekicks.
Well, so in literature, there's a lot of ways. I mean, we use them as reactive characters. We use them as props for that you can't have your main character to do, like getting kidnapped or whatever, and being saved and all that. That's a very traditional, old-fashioned kind of sidekick kind of role. And you can. The other thing is, of course, we mentioned. Sidekicks and supporting characters can be there to tell us how great the main character is, or highlight the fantastic things that the main character can do, because we've got people to reflect against them, provide the background where the main character can act beautifully against. If you're a bad writer and you're giving your main character the role of a Mary Sue, then all the other characters exist just to tell you how fantastic they are. Marvelous and great, beautiful, and how they want to date them.
Oh my God, that is like I have heard a lot of. I have to say, and this is a guilty pleasure of mine, that there is so much drama regarding how the comics, especially Western superhero comics, are declining, and the comic industry is imploding in and of itself, and whatever. Anyway, for me, it's extremely entertaining to watch and not partake. So there is this one thing, and there is relevance. I'm not just saying it. They have a big gripe is that when they want to promote a character for whatever purpose, like they are like a minority character, or they are a girl power character, or whatever, what they do is according to the critics, okay, I haven't actually read it, is that they demote all the other previously main character superheroes into the sidekick status, where they all look up to and marvel at the amazing awesomeness of this, X and Y character. And the entire book is this insufferably tedious and never-ending iconography of this amazing super character that does everything perfectly. And wow, she came to save me. Although I'm also a superhero character that's supposed to be able to, kick ass and everything. But now I have been nerfed so that I can, be amazed by this other new character. So
that's bad writing. That's bad.
Yes, that's very bad writing. And if you also do that for sidekicks, that is also very bad writing, by the way.
Yeah.
A sidekick should be more than just there to be a prop for the main character, assuming that they are actually a sidekick character. They should be there because they complement the main character, and if the sidekick leaves, then you must show that the main character has problems. They have problems functioning as well as they do when the sidekick is there.
Yeah, so they actually have a role. They have a meaning. And you can't demote main characters to a role of sidekick, because then what I mean is you can't introduce a new character and then take main characters and make them subservient, to the needs of another character, because then that invalidates their whole reason for being. So that's something you really have to worry about. That's just bad writing whenever that happens. It's It's really, really bad. It's not only done in that situation you're talking about, like with comics. It's done in a lot of different instances as well. And whenever that is done like that, it's always just awkward and bad, because people get behind these kind of people and they like them, and they want their character to be sort of have a main stage. And when suddenly they're in the background or whatever, and someone else taking over, then they feel let down. They feel hurt. They lose interest in that work. So you shouldn't do that.
Absolutely.
Fair enough, you want to have another main character come in, but they should be seen as equals, not, you're fantastic. Oh, wow, I'm great, but you're even better. Oh, that's...
Yes. Oh, my God. It's like you are, and if there are minors watching here, listening to this, just cover their ears for a moment. But it's like watching them fondling each other, and it's horrid to watch. It's like, oh my goodness, it's disgusting. But yeah, I also want to mention that when you have a good sidekick, they may not be the main character, but they have agency and personality that is very powerful in and of itself. And I want to mention, I haven't talked a lot about this pulp fiction, old school Greek story that was about the World War II, and the closest thing we ever had to a Greek superhero. And he was supposedly this young man who was resistance, but he was also super amazing in everything, and he also could see in the dark. That's why I said that he was the closest thing we got to a superhero. And he had two main sidekicks, and often he had another two peripheral sidekicks. But the thing about that was that they were all super unique. And although he was the most bombastic thing ever to exist, they too were extremely important to his existence. Like, they weren't there just to ooh and ah and be impressed. Usually they were either foils to his ideas and what he wanted to do and everything. Even his love interest, because one of the sidekicks was also the love interest. But she was like, don't give me that sort of idiot reasoning. Like, I'm not gonna do this. We're gonna do that. That sort of thing. Which, of course, gave her the status of the second in command for a reason, not just because she was the girl and the love interest. She was actually the voice of reason when he went overboard, which is another thing that he had actually, along with the bombastic elements, he also had some very real drawbacks that if his sidekicks weren't there, they would go unchecked.
Right.
So, and the reason that I'm mentioning it now is that there came this time, and I still remember it. It traumatized me as a kid when I was reading it, and it has traumatized everyone who has read this thing. Like, everyone still remembers it, even if they are 60 years old. And the thing is, what the two sidekicks of the four are killed off at some point, and they are killed off very suddenly, and nobody expects it.
Oh.
And it's horrid. It's horrid because you go through a grueling period of everyone having problems because they are not there. Oh. Aside the grieving, and aside the whole, oh my God, how did this happen? It's my fault, and I will self-flagellate for 3 issues and stuff. But aside that, there was a very practical problem in that every mission went south because the sidekicks that would normally be there to catch the problem weren't there.
Right.
And so the problem happened.
Yeah.
And this made everybody feel even worse because you were reminded of the damn death for at least 20 issues, and those issues were weekly. So imagine how long it took until that chapter was actually done. And they moved on, and they found new sidekicks that also got killed off at some point. That's another thing. Like, he had plot armor. You knew that he would never actually be dead, even in the instances where he was dead and stuff. But his sidekicks didn't.
Yeah.
And that was where the suspense would.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because the main character often in a lot of things is inviolate. So any bad thing has to happen to the sidekick. And sometimes they can be killed, and other times it's the reverse. So Sherlock Holmes was the one that was killed, and Raffles, I keep talking about these two examples, that they were the ones that were killed, and the sidekicks were there to sort of report on that. So in those cases, because you're seeing the world through the eyes of the sidekick, because they're the document taker. And
often people actually liked the sidekicks far more than the main character. Not that he was unpopular, everyone liked him anyway, but the sidekicks had this very human sort of feel to it. Like, I could be that guy. I could be that kid.
You can insert yourself using these characters. Yeah. Well, it's like, say, Doctor Who. It's the same.
And there was this.
Oh, go on. Sorry.
No. The other thing, the element I wanted to say was that when those kids died, because usually they were all kids, and you see now where I got that streak. When those kids died, the problem was, okay, the main character survived, of course, but he was seriously nerfed while going through the grieving process, and not just on surface. Oh my God, I'm crying all the time. He had problems in judgment. He couldn't make proper judgment calls. He botched missions, or he went completely insane, and that was very scary, and things like that. So you okay, he had plot armor in one sense, but he wasn't invulnerable to this thing. So
so basically the sidekick is like a limb or something like that's been hacked off, and now the main character is like disabled until he has that other part of himself to work with.
Exactly.
So that's an interesting example. I was going to bring up the example of, say, the Doctor Who universe, where they've always had like companions, multiple companions, either one or several, and they perform that humanizing aspect because Doctor Who is an alien, and his he or she are very they're super people. He's not doesn't think about things, like they don't touch him in the same kind of way as they do for a human character who the sidekicks are. So that allows for different aspects of like the story and the world to be shown, but also he's invulnerable. So the sidekicks are where the danger happens. If something happens to them, it's you really worry. But also it's the same sort of thing in that his companions, the Doctor does not function as well within the story, within the world, without the sidekick, without his companions, because he becomes more too aloof, and things don't touch him as well. He's not motivated to go on interesting jaunts and things like that. He's not motivated to see things in the same way that he does with his companions. So it does have a lot more uses than just a reactive character. There are there's real consequences to losing that companion, that sidekick, and
of course
they do have a role. Exactly like with your characters there, but not exactly like, but somewhat anyway. It sounds like those sidekicks have far huger role than sidekicks normally do within stories. I mean, not within like the in the prose, but within like the structurally they have a far greater role. So it's funny to think of.
That was.
I'll go on.
Oh no, you go on.
I was saying it's funny to think of writing in a formal structural sense, but also in like the more visceral entertainment sense. And they're two separate things. There's behind the scenes, and there's like the more entertaining stuff, on the surface that we take in. So
absolutely. Like I'm thinking now, I'm trying to take it a little bit towards the webcomic, like webcomics and everything. I can't say that I see official sidekicks like this clear cut as the one that we have been discussing.
Well,
I can't think of
when people write a superhero comic, when they're more traditional, that's when you're going to see sidekicks pop up. Although sidekicks, in a superhero sense, sort of, they fell out of favor because that was a very old-fashioned kind of thing. The idea was like just to have it strictly as an audience insert, because they thought, this teen boys are going to read this. We have to have a character for the teen boys to sympathize with. So that's pretty much where they started, I think. And that fell out of favor in the 1960s, 1970s. I think it started to change, and then you had like Batman without Robin. And that's just how it was. Superman without Jimmy Olsen, all that kind of stuff. So that's why we don't have it so much these days. But people came back to that and saw, it does have a use. It's more use than just an insert. And that's where the role kind of expanded a bit. So yeah, it's not something you see very much in a lot of webcomics, but you do have, like we were talking, like in our comics, like in my Pinky TA, I have some supporting characters, but the supporting characters sort of have their sidekicks. So at least like Betty has this Colin character who is more of a reactive character for her, and he functions more as her sidekick. And I think that's where you'll sort of find it in comics. You'll find them more as supporting characters having their sidekick rather than an official sidekick for the main character, or maybe a villain sidekick you might have. That's a very traditional thing.
Yeah, I'm thinking now in Without Moonlight, you could call like Bomb being the sidekick to Eichel, maybe is
yeah.
I could see that a little bit, though Bomb absolutely hates Eichel. There's no way that he would obey if he had the chance and a choice. But he doesn't, so maybe there's that.
And any one of the Leaper kids can fall into Photos as a sidekick role. Like if they became more of...
definitely. That could happen, but it would be occasional, in the sense that they definitely recognize him as having some sort of rank in their little group, and being the leader, which is something that he only actually verbally refers to when he has to compete for authority with Orestes in what Diomedes wants to do and is going to do with certain things. So yeah, I guess that in that sense they could be sidekick-ish.
Sidekick-ish. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, it's more like the Frodo and Sam Gamgee kind of thing there, in that he's not we don't have official sidekicks in webcomics often, but you have characters that fall into that role as, you know, the social dynamic for whatever reason.
You cut off a little bit there. What was that?
Well, I'm saying it's more like in the Lord of the Rings, where you have Sam Gamgee and Frodo Baggins. You have characters that are not official sidekicks. They sort of socially fall into that role for a period or for whatever reason. I think that's more what you'll get. So they become more than just a supporting character, but less than a main character. So they are more sidekick than anything else. That's what you tend to get.
Sam, I think, remains Frodo's sidekick even when he takes initiative. Because really, if you think about it, the initiative that he takes is in order to get the task done that has been decided upon by Frodo.
Yeah, no, think about it. Sam is a main character, but he's a sidekick character. That's interesting.
Yes, like Sam, actually, what is Sam's agency in all of this? The one thing that he chooses, as far as I remember, is that he wants to go with in order to see the elves in the beginning, and then he stays. Like his choice is to remain loyal to Frodo. But if, for example, Frodo wanted to, bugger off and throw off the ring and flip everyone off and go back to the Shire, he would follow Frodo. Yeah. He wouldn't pick up the mission on his own. So I think that even when he does this amazing heroic work of going to save Frodo and becoming, slaying the giant spider, slaying Shelob and everything, he does it to save his master, basically.
Yeah.
He's not the hero, and he never is, of the story.
Yeah, exactly. He's always fallen into that secondary role. To it's a self-selected role as well. It's not something that I don't think even Frodo would really have put him into that role of Frodo really sort of considers himself like a higher status person. It's just that Sam considers himself a lower status person, and Sam naturally falls into that role. It's strange. Well, it's not strange to that period where that character came from, but strange.
I think it's very British. That's what I was going to say. I think it is extremely British that everybody stays in their place and everything is neat. So,
well, it's weird. So, say you've got the Jeeves and Wooster stories. The famous Bertie Wooster and Jeeves. So, Jeeves is Bertie's valet, and he's because Bertie Wooster's high social class, inherited wealth, all that kind of stuff, and Jeeves is a natural, slightly lower class, but he has the job of being the butler servant, all the things that a valet is. But in the stories, of course, Jeeves is the really smart one and gets Bertie out of all the problems and fixes everyone's problems. So Jeeves really is the Sherlock Holmes in the stories. And Bertie sort of is the chronicler of the stories, but he's always in a lower role. So you've got that reversal there. And Bertie always makes specific reference to class all the time. And he's saying, whatever. He's always actually talking about class and the class system, and how Jeeves should help him out because I'm the higher class person and all this, but that's never how things work, and it's a very, very weird satire on the whole thing, because Jeeves is actually in the role. He's smoothing the way for Bertie and everything, because Jeeves sees his role as I want you to be a lord, and I want you to be a high class person in my mold, the way I think you should be. So you should dress the way I think you should dress. You should behave the way I should dress. You should marry. You should have a relationship with whoever I think you should be. So I'm going to mold you into the perfect person. Even though, I'm below you on the social scale, I'm absolutely in charge of you and everything you do. So that's
basically, I'm living vicariously through you. So there's that.
I don't know. It's not really he's living through it. He considers him as being my clay to mold into a lord, and that's how it should be. Be the way I make you. He's sees himself as the teacher almost, and him as the young pupil, and that's a reversal of that whole class thing, which is I like. Yeah, so Bertie is definitely the sidekick to Jeeves, which is
absolutely
an inversion, and I think everyone should read those stories just to take in imbibe the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s version of British class, and also see the inversion and see how things are mixed up there. So,
and I'm thinking now, I don't know, how are we for time? Are we almost done?
Yeah, pretty much almost done, so we can wrap up or...
Okay, then very quickly. The one thing I'm thinking that you can have the sidekick be officially a sidekick and still be the main character could be the mentor-student relationship, while you have everything, the point of view, the motivations, everything go through the sidekick, who is the student, to the mentor, because the mentor calls the shots and is the leader and does whatever he deems appropriate to be done. And so you have this sidekick status for the main character. until, of course, they graduate and they become their own selves.
Oh, well.
That's the one last thing I wanted to mention.
Yeah, like a really horrible example of that would be the prequel movies for Star Wars. So Anakin is in that role. He's the student.
No.
to Obi-Wan.
Better is like a Skywalker with Yoda. It's better. Although it's very short-lived.
Yeah,
but that's a little better.
Or Obi-Wan. Skywalker with Obi-Wan Kenobi in the first film.
Yes. That sort of thing. Still not very the best examples. In Star Wars, I think everything happens way too quickly for it to become actually distilled into a proper relationship. But yeah, more efficient, I think.
Yeah, it's an interesting. There's so many things you can do with sidekick characters. Supporting characters, of course, but yeah, sidekicks as. I mean, I said before that you can graduate from supporting character to sidekick, which is, and sidekicks aren't main characters, but they are. Sidekicks are main characters. Always main characters. So I was completely wrong in saying that. So they aren't really supporting characters. They are main characters who are supporting characters as well. That's interesting. They are both.
They are main characters without being the protagonist. Let's put it that way.
But they can act as a supporting character as well. Mm-hmm. They can have that as a secondary role. It's interesting. That's interesting. Okay, well, that has been QUACKCAST number 426, Sidekicking.
Yes.
All right. Goodbye, brave listeners, and check out our Patreon videos, or if you become a patron at $5 and up level, you can actually see us chatting. Okay.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.